great to be here today. You're probably wondering, why am I talking about fortresses and villages? And it's funny, at Mirium, I characterize our business like a series of villages all connected. So it got me thinking about, what are the differences between fortresses and villages? And what can companies and corporations and startups learn from either or? And so I started doing homework, started doing research on the differences between the two. This is a fortress. It's a fortress in Bulgaria. It's called Baba Vita. Is anyone here from Bulgaria? Has anyone been to this fortress? Out of curiosity, has anyone been to this fortress? So we got some people there. How are you? This was the premise of some of my research, and it's a beautiful fortress. It has a moat. It's large in scale, but it's relatively the same. This has been around since the 10th century. It's relatively the same. What's interesting about it is it's designed to stand through time. It's designed to last, which is a really important trait of a fortress. It's solid. Much like big businesses today, they're solid. They're large in scale. They're self-contained. So as you look at big business today, most of them are generally self-contained. And what I'm talking about is not necessarily that big businesses can't become villages, but there's characteristics of big businesses that need to ultimately change. They're impressive in its nature. This is a beautiful photo. For those who look at fortresses, because I had a chance to look at a lot of different fortresses, they're incredibly impressive in terms of its size and scale, and they stake out territory, which is very common for fortresses. And they announce their presence, either through large scale of army, different locations, very large in scale. And they're there to defend. They're there to defend territory, which is very common if you look at today's economy. Businesses that have been around forever are in a position where they have to defend because people are coming up right behind them. And ultimately, there's a huge investment associated with creating a fortress, huge investment. And on top of it, it takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of effort to build it. And ultimately, they stay the same. Fortresses over the years, for those who go and visit any fortress, you notice they generally stay the same. And they're not occupied, not a lot of people there. They generally stay the same. This is a village, beautiful village. And villages have very different characteristics. Number one, they evolve. Villages change. They're adaptable, which is really important in today's world. As everyone knows, and just being at this event, you have everything from robotics to virtual reality. In order to survive today, you have to have a village mindset. You have to be incredibly adaptable. Villages are for the living, they're for people that exist, economies that exist, economies that are incredibly fluid. And they're part of nature. And this is really important when you think about it, is that if you lose touch with what's around you, you ultimately think about your products differently and how you market to them, how you get them out to to your customers. If you're not in tune with what's around you, you're going to lose sight of that. And they're designed to expand. What's interesting about villages, they're generally borderless. So they're generally connected with other villages. And there's a certain commonality between the villages as well, which you find, and they're sustainable. And this is also an important characteristic. And they're obviously welcoming, and most importantly is they're connected and they're accessible. It's very easy to generally get in and out. They're generally connected with one another. And that's an important distinction because at the end of the day, businesses and companies that understand connectivity are going to find ways to differentiate themselves. And we all know we're living through massive change. There's so much change going on around us every day. And this over here is a great quote, and essentially just the summary of this is that companies and corporations that were leaders in their marketplaces, which essentially are what I call fortress businesses, are no longer going to be able to retain their positions. There's a lot of good studies out there about corporations that have led an industry, and we see it today, the Kmarts of the world, the Barnes and Nobles of the world, the list goes on, that are under so much tremendous pressure. When I think about my experience in being in boardrooms, running a digital marketing tech business with, dealing with Fortune 500 companies, it's unbelievable the pressure corporations are under today. How do you actually reinvent your business? How do you ultimately reinvent your products? How do you actually get to market? And that's a really important part of something to think about from a business perspective. And it's all being driven by connectivity. And what's interesting is that the office itself is being redefined. Everything's being redefined. Competition is being redefined, and industries are essentially in flux. And if you're a business, we should be thinking of ourselves some really key questions. If you're a business today, in order to be a village business, you have to be thinking about a couple key things. Number one, what are we doing with new ideas and market forces? So when you think about what's around you, what are you doing to really differentiate yourself? How are you really going to be out there and have a competitive advantage? Are you adapting to what's around you? And this is something that I've seen a lot happening with corporations. When I think about it, a good example is the automotive industry. You know, one of the things that they do really well is they bring technology into the cars versus integrating technology in from the start. They really do a good job of bringing people in. You know, Verizon just launched a new product called Verizon Hum. And what it is, it's a mobile application that connects into your car. And so what you're going to see is some of the biggest and most innovation that happens are happening outside the industry itself. And so understanding how to adapt is really critical when you're sitting in your business meetings and you're thinking about how to differentiate. Can you adapt, and do you have the ability to adapt? Or are you ignoring them? You know, I'm shocked how many people do not spend time with the research, understand your customers, understanding key behavior, looking at your data is incredibly critical, because if you're not really listening to what's around you. And ultimately are you reacting to disruptive ideas? I recall, I'll never forget this, I was sitting in a meeting with some of the executives at Sony. Is anyone here from Sony, just out of curiosity, before I make a comment? No, good, we'll keep going. So I was with the folks at Sony, and I'll never forget this. I'm with the guy that actually was running the Walkman business. And at the time, they owned the marketplace, and people forget that Walkman really had one of the largest market share of kind of the portable audio business. And then I remember that day, someone walks in and said, I'm going to show you this new device that Apple just came out. It's called the iPod. And right then it was over, because what the team didn't realize is that it wasn't the iPod, it was the iTunes that ultimately was what was going to destroy the marketplace. It was the connectivity part of it. And it was amazing, because at the end of the day, disruption, it's really hard to respond to something like that. How do you respond when someone's so far ahead of you and they've created the ecosystem around you? So being aggressive there is important. And I think the mindset becomes important. You know, one of the things you have to ask yourself is that, do you have a growth mindset or do you have a fixed mindset? And that's really important, because I believe that ultimately, you know, in order to survive, you have to continually have a growth mindset. And the growth mindset's about handling challenges and going after challenges and thinking out of the box and questioning things and challenging things. A fixed mindset is essentially a defense mode, where eventually your business model is going to get disruptive consistently. And you know, we look at Uber today, you know, out there fighting. And I even think about Slack, who's speaking here today. It's funny, because in our corporation, we had several employees that wanted to use Slack as a tool for inter-office connectivity. And we had mandated that they use something on Microsoft. And the next thing we know, half the company starts using Slack. And then 75% of the company's using Slack. And now everyone's using Slack. And we had to go buy a Slack professional license, because we couldn't stop our business, because our team, they ultimately decided what technology they wanted to build upon. And you have to be incredibly quick to adapt. I think the speed in which you move is critical. You know, there's a whole thing around what's called agile methodology, or prototyping, or rapid prototyping. The ability to create things is really important. So one of the things that I recommend everyone to do, if you have a big idea and you have a concept that you want to get out there, you have to do it quickly, and you need to be around small teams of people that can deliver that thinking immediately. You know, we did this big project with Caterpillar recently, and it was interesting because we had a very small group of people, and it was all focused around quick prototyping. We were able to get a prototype together within a week of an idea. Within a week of an idea. We were able then to test it about 2 weeks later with a small group, and then get a proof of concept and take it to market. And this becomes really critical, because from a business perspective, your ability to move and the fluidity of your organization and the ability to get to market quickly becomes a major differentiator. And do you play well with others? I think that the world today is about ultimate collaboration. The world today is designed to collaborate. If you look at technology companies today, when I think about the people in the search marketing space or the content management space, the Adobes of the world, the Salesforce of the world, you know, different people here in the booths that are going to be the new Adobes of the world, you have to be able to collaborate with what's around you. The world is one big API, meaning that ultimately the success of your business could be your ability to build on top of someone else's technology. That could be the thing that really inevitably defines you and differentiates you from a business perspective. And is your competition really your competition? We talk about frenemies. You hear a lot of frenemies. We have at WPP, we have a very strong relationship with Google. At the same time, Google is a direct competitor because they go after clients directly. Or even Facebook, they're a direct competitor. If you're a marketer today, why do you need an agency? You go directly to Google, maybe Facebook. But we have to partner with Facebook and Google because it's an integral part of our business. And so it's really important to note that your competition may not be your competition. And the more you open up your business and actually get out there and discover how can you connect into what's around you, the more successful you're ultimately going to be. And then ultimately it's about collaboration. And how do you actually drive collaboration from a business perspective? And do you have the ability to be both global and local? And this is one thing that I continue to see. So when I think about our clients, when I think about people that are really invested heavily in digital, they're global. Because if you're in digital and you're heavily invested in digital, most likely anything you do and anything you create has the ability to be accessed globally. But the reality is your ability to be hyper-localized becomes incredibly critical. So we just worked on a very large initiative recently with 3M, where we helped them take their product and localize it in market. And one of the things that I saw is that if you don't have teams of people that understand very specific within local cultures how people use things differently, you're going to fail miserably. I mean, a good example is when I think about Jakarta, a market that we're very heavily invested in, it's social and it's mobile because they skip the desktop, much like Mexico City, very similar type of markets. And so you have to be really smart about how what you're creating and what you're building is really local in nature. And do you have a flat structure? Much like villages, you have to be incredibly flat. I mean, sure, there's going to always be a leader, but you have to be flat because villages are about, farmers and hunters and borderless societies. And I believe today, and what I continue to see, and I even think about my own personal experience, I don't have an office. I run a company of 2,500 employees, and I essentially just float around the world in a backpack because the flatter, the better. Because there's so much you can learn from everyone around you. So by you putting yourself away, by putting your whole executive team in corners, you're going to lose your ability to connect with everyone around you, which becomes incredibly critical. And do you give your innovative employees the ability to hear them? And this is one thing that I see get lost, is that companies and corporations don't spend enough time with their people. They don't spend enough time serving their people. They don't understand who can help drive innovation within an organization. One of the things that I've seen deploy very successfully is you create certain leader programs, right? And then we have this whole thing called the Makers program that we're creating within our organization. And the Makers program is really about connecting people from all over the world that want to produce products. And then how do we actually help them take those products to market, and how do we protect their IP as they go to market? And so it's really important that you have to understand that we live in a world that's driven by freelancers. We live in a world of employees that are no longer employees. So if you don't create an environment that allows people to feel like startups, that feel like innovators, you're eventually going to lose them. And so from a business perspective, your ability to listen becomes super critical. And how well you listen and respond in real time becomes important. I mean, one thing's to listen, and how you react to change is a whole other story. I've seen everything. I don't know if people have seen these newsrooms, large kind of central hubs with data comes integrated in. You can look at social media. You can look at different forms of research, gets piped into one central location. How you look at data and how you set that up, and every organization's different, because what you might find as a key performance indicator for your business could be very different. Or even what you might find as a KPI for yourself might be different for a different executive within an organization. So how you look at data, how you parse data, how you make sense of data, and then how you respond to that is obviously critical. And Nest is a good example. What I love about Nest is, for people following that, it isn't just the fact that they've created the thermostat. They've created Thread, which is one of their network protocols. And then on top of that, they've created Weave. And Weave is the ability to actually connect in through their APIs. So people like Yale Links, for example, who's doing other stuff within the home, is connecting into the Nest protocol. So Nest is essentially creating the API for your home. And now it's about piping into that API and working with that API. Because ultimately, your ability to be fluid on top of other people's technology, and Nest found it as a major, major differentiator. And the reality is, the fortress, again, is very rigid, right? In the case of Nest, they've created fluidity. They function much more like a village, much more like a village. And this is the type of mindset from a business perspective that you have to continue to deploy. And this over here is an example where Mayo Clinic in the health space, for those that are in healthcare is an amazing, amazing space right now. There is so much going on from a standpoint of data, from the standpoint of compliance, How can you continue to innovate around healthcare? There's all this different technology coming in. Mayo Clinic has invested very heavily in this area. They've very heavily in mobile applications, in data for your patients, and how to get access to information. They've figured out a way to connect all that together into one mobile application. And so, from a business perspective, understanding how to make the life smaller, how to make your business feel much more like a village, technology could be the way to do it. Technology could be the way where you can continue to centralize that. And this is some of the Mayo work that they had shown. And I think GE is interesting. Have people been watching the GE commercials? This is a $150 billion business. And GE, from a business perspective, is a business that, I didn't even know this until I did the research. So they're like the 7th largest or 4th largest software company in the world. It's amazing. And they have an entire campaign out there trying to track software developers. So for those who haven't seen the commercial, it's actually a really good commercial. I'm actually going to skip through it. And one of the things that GE does is they're really focused on, they have something called the GE Global Innovation Barometer. And they actually look at their top executives, and they actually gather research, and they look at what are people seeing in the industry. Are we disruptive enough? What form is technology doing to our business? Here are some of the key things that they look at, and then they really focus on how to react against it. So GE, even though we can make an argument they're a big fortress, are trying to become much more like a village in terms of the research, their data, the types of people they're trying to attract, marketing efforts they're trying to do. This is a good example of a company that's changing. And this is obviously a great quote. And I think that, fundamentally a business, needs to have the ability to look at things and touch things and change things and evolve things. Because you never know where that opportunity is within your organizations. You never know where they sit. And much like Mr. Edison here, you have the ability to improve everything. And then, the last point I have over here
Proud of you, son.
This video for GE. Take a look at this.
Manufacturer. Well, that's why I dug this out for you. It's your grandpappy's hammer, and he would have wanted you to have it.
It meant a lot to him.
Yes, GE makes powerful machines, but I'll be writing the code that will allow those machines to share information with each other. I'll be changing the way the world...
You can't pick it up, can you? Go ahead. You can't lift the hammer.
It's okay, though. You're going to change the world.
And that's great. For those, has anyone seen the idea one? There's this idea one that's amazing. I'm not sure if it's actually in this presentation, but it's a fantastic one. And it's essentially this idea, and the idea is actually this terrible, I can't even describe it. It's like this little, almost like a puppet. And the idea becomes something. So make sure you look it up. It's a fantastic video. But that video is really about, ultimately, is that from a business perspective, GE is trying to reposition themselves truly as an idea company and really track that generation that continue to advance them much more of a software company. And Johnson & Johnson is actually one of our clients as well. And J&J is also very dedicated on innovation. They run everything from, when I think about people like Citigroup, I think about MasterCard's here. Raja is the CMO there. He's in, I believe he's somewhere, at the Web Summit. I've had some time to spend with him. And these big corporations are really invested very heavily in innovations and entrepreneurship and connecting people within. Everyone has their kind of, their innovation labs, or, MasterCard, for example, is powering so much in the kind of the payment space. They make a majority of their revenue from empowering other people. And Johnson & Johnson's really invested very heavily in technology and very heavily in entrepreneurship. We just launched an application for them recently, specifically around social gathering of data on who's sick and who's not sick, and how to use that data to find the right medicine for you. And it's a really cool application. It's integrated into retail. It's something that's very new for them. But they've pushed us very hard around that. So ultimately, the one question you have to ask yourself from a business perspective, do you have a fortress mentality or do you have a village mentality? And I highly recommend, and I'd make an argument to all of you, that having a village mentality is ultimately what's going to not only keep you alive and to ensure that you don't remain the same. So anyways, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your summit.